Hi, my name is Amy Cha, and I currently work as a pharmacist at New York Presbyterian Lawrence Hospital. In this analysis, I'm going to talk about the peer-reviewed article, Let Me Tell You About My, Provider Self-Disclosure in the Emergency Department Builds Patient Report, found in the Western Journal of Emergency Medicine, Integrating Emergency Care with Population Health. The authors, Corey Zink, Marcia Perry, Corey London, Olivia Floto, Benjamin Basson, John Burkhart, and Sally Santon examine how patients react to ED physicians self-disclosing, what types of self-disclosure are relevant, and if this indeed increases the quality of communication between providers and patients. Now, I know that this is a very specific article in the sense that it focuses on communication between ER physicians and patients. I am not an ER physician, and I'm going to make the bold assumption that many of you here are not ER physicians as well. However, as I began to read, I realized that the types of disclosure discussed were ones all healthcare providers deal with, such as discussing family, education, and so on. As healthcare providers, we are faced with the difficult decision to self-disclose, what to disclose, and to wonder if our attempt at building trust and a stronger communication bridge will help our patients. As a result, I believe this article will be immensely helpful to our communicative professional lives. To summarize, the aim of this article is to determine if physician self-disclosure is effective in increasing communication and building rapport between ER providers and patients. Both patients and physicians were asked about types of self-disclosure present during the examination, if any, if communication was perceived to be good, if self-disclosure was important to them, and whether or not self-disclosure made the patient want to heed physician advice more or less. 520 patients were interviewed with verbal consent, but physicians and patients were not told what the interview was for. Patients were reassured that their answers would not affect their treatment. Out of the patients interviewed, it was found that 18.9% of providers self-disclosed, 69.8% did not, and 11.3% were unsure if it occurred. Of those interactions with self-disclosure, a majority, 63.4%, reported excellent communication skills, and 53.7% reported excellent provider rapport. Overall, 96% of participants agreed that a good relationship with their ED doctor was very or somewhat important. Generally, patients believe that ER doctors who self-disclose have good communication skills as long as the type of self-disclosure is what they want to hear. It was discovered that patients want to hear about the provider's experience with similar ailments and about the education and family of the physician. Overall, the study was well conducted, and it is evident by observing that researchers obtained answers from both parties anonymously. Particularly, researchers' decision to perform a literature review against previous similar studies provided more validity to the analysis. There had been previous studies done that showed that self-disclosure was not beneficial, and by focusing on similar questions examined in these studies, researchers were able to provide validity to the findings of this analysis. With the literature review, there was a basis for comparison as to why results differed between the different studies. The conclusion that different types of care settings, primary care physician versus surgical versus emergency department, resulted. As per the authors, ERs are a combination of PCPs and surgical units, yielding in the current conclusion. Despite the strengths of the studies, though, there are flaws to it as well. One is that patients may have been afraid to answer truthfully. Due to fears or maybe worse patient care, patients may have declined or fibbed during their interview. If so, the validity of the study may be void and thus an inaccurate depiction of self-disclosure on building rapport and communication is presented. Another flaw is that different doctors use different types of self-disclosure. In the study, it was found that most patients either wanted to know about a physician's education, family, and experiences with similar ailments. If some physicians only disclosed their after-work plans, the results would have been skewed in that more patients would have disliked self-disclosure. However, if said physicians had self-disclosed about what the patients wanted to hear, would more patients have voted yes, that self-disclosure is helpful to communications and their care? In conclusion, it seems that self-disclosure does aid in building rapport between providers and patients, as well as increasing perceptions of excellent communication. As long as providers do not overshare, communication is effective. However, it's clear that further studies of the effects of self-disclosure in boosting communication is warranted. Although preliminary studies show positive results, it also shows that not many providers are self-disclosing. If physicians are still not self-disclosing, it's difficult to get a true depiction of the effects of self-disclosure on communication. Now, before I leave, I'd like to leave you all with some food for thought. Attached, I have 4 questions that I would love for you to answer and I would love to respond to. Thank you for joining me in my leadership symposium and have a wonderful night.